Bonjour, Kinamagane Nene Ireland Indigenous, and welcome to this episode of the My Math Network. Today's episode, Chapter 12, Lesson 6, Hands-on Build Three-Dimensional Figures. Let's begin by looking at our previous session, which was Lesson 5. And we were classifying quadrilaterals. You can see on this one, we have one pair of opposite sides congruent, one pair of opposite sides is parallel, and it's a trapezoid. And opposite sides congruent and parallel, four right angles, rectangle. And a lot of this came from the answers on 929. Then we look down here. And you see opposite sides parallel. All of these have that: parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, and square. Four right angles, just rectangle and square. And exactly one pair of opposite sides parallel, trapezoid. And looking down, it's possible to draw a quadrilateral with four congruent sides that is not a parallelogram. No, the quadrilateral will be a square or rhombus, which are both parallelograms. And what type of quadrilateral can be used to describe the shape of a computer screen? Could be a rectangle. You might oddly have a square, but it's really a rectangle as well. And then an rectangle with four is a parallelogram with four right angles. Trapezoid is a quadrilateral, exactly as that key word there. And what's true about these? K and N are parallelograms. Today's task will include some hands-on activity. There's going to be a vocabulary check, which will be on heavily from 935. And you'll have this to kind of analyze. The essential question: how does geometry help me solve problems in everyday life? You're going to begin with the book on page 935. And you're going to be given paper if you're in the classroom. If you were absent today, you may not have the paper, but you may have to get it. And it gives you the opportunity to do these things. There are some highlighted words. A three-dimensional figure has length, width, and height. So because each of those is its own dimension. Remember, a one-dimensional thing, such as the distance between 2 points, a line, is one-dimensional. If it had length and width, it was two-dimensional, like a rectangle. And now we have a rectangular prism that has all three of those: length, width, and height. And that is a two-dimensional pattern of a three-dimensional figure, such as this right here. A cube is a three-dimensional figure with six faces, and each of these, when you put together, is a face. If you're holding up a box, a Kleenex box, each of the sides is what we call a face. That are congruent squares. So each of these are exactly the same. A rectangular prism is a three-dimensional figure with six rectangular faces. So you might have two that are the same, and then these ones might be a little bit longer, like is traditional with a Kleenex box. The two sides on the ends could very well be squares, and then the rectangles are longer. And yes, a cube is a particular type of rectangular prism. So we have some steps here. And you're going to want to pause the video at points while you're doing this in order to facilitate it. And then unpause when you're ready. So before you pause, let's look at the directions. Copy the net shown onto grid paper, and you have that. Cut out the net, fold along the lines to form a three-dimensional, and you'll have to add those lines in what figure. Go ahead, pause the video, and unpause when you're ready. Let me go ahead and pause the video now. And welcome back. And let's see how you did. And it was a cube. And you can look at it and probably know you had 5 by 5. Every one of these were 5 by 5 or 25. And we're able to go from there. All right, let's move on to the next page. There'll be some more here. Copy this net onto grid paper. You might already be able to identify this shape. And we will then go ahead and pause the video, do that, and then unpause when you're ready. You may pause now. Welcome back. Let's see how you did. So we cut it out, and we get, it's a rectangular prism, like a Kleenex box. They each have 6 faces. That's how they're alike, and the faces meet at right angles. And the first, how are they different? First figure has faces that are all congruent. These ones are not all congruent. By the way, where these all meet, each corner is known as a vertice. And each of these, once it's folded, is known as an edge. Let's talk about it. In the first activity, what two-dimensional figure forms the face of the figure? How many faces? And we have 5 by 5 by 5. And as we noticed, it was a square, each of them. And there were 6 faces, and all 6 are congruent. What is the length, height, and width of the cube you formed in the first activity? Well, look at either your cube or this image here, and it tells you there are 5 units. So the length is 5, the width is 5, and the height is 5. So the volume of this, by the way, is 5 cubed, which is 125 cubic units. Just a little freebie. So you multiply them all together. What do I notice about the length, width, and height of the cube? They're all congruent. And they're good. What two-dimensional figures form the faces? And how many faces, how many are congruent? Well, if you look at it on the ends, you had a cube. So we have a square, not a cube. We have rectangles and squares. There are 6 faces. The 4 rectangles are congruent and the 2 squares are congruent, but they are not congruent to each other. I'm going to go ahead and do this one for practice. And then we'll answer it, and then we'll move on. So go ahead and pause the video, and let's see how you did. Welcome back. Let's see how you did in number 5. What figure? A rectangular prism. And then on 6, what two-dimensional figure forms the faces? Rectangles, because they're not all the same. There are 6 faces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. There are 3 pairs of congruent rectangles. Here's one, here's one, another one, and then these 2 are congruent. At this time, you can go into the homework. It's located right here. The vocabulary check, again, will be heavily on 935. You can kind of use your skills here by counting the number of blocks. That's my hint to you to answer these questions. If you're in the physical classroom, you'll turn this paper in. If you're at home, you will complete the assignment using the Google form. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at mireland@sitechipschool.net. Otherwise, have a minute, Gijigat, Minwa, Bamapi.